You're listening to the Survivor Sweat Podcast with Mike Buchmiller and Russell Rosenblum. If you're looking for strategy articles and just about everything Survivor, head to survivorsweat.com. Now, let's get to it.
All right, welcome to Survivor Sweat Pod number 8. I am Mike Buchmiller, and this is Russell Rosenblum, my partner in crime here. We were last year's Jed entry, and as I said last week, Jed is dead, and all of our other picks are officially dead. We are dust, my friend. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that? Yeah, no, this was awful. I mean, really, it's been, a friend of ours said to us, we used up all our luck last season. We can't complain too much. There's no question there's skill in the Survivor contest. There's no question there's luck in the Survivors contest. There's no question there's skill in betting NFL football. There's no question there's luck in betting NFL football. I mean, it is what it is. Certainly frustrating. You take this week, and as usual, it looked as if Arizona might have some sort of chance to win a game, and they didn't find a way to. Not that that's what knocked us out, and I'm probably glad they won in the end, because that would have been even more frustrating.
Absolutely.
We suspected you'd have 50 to 60% sitting on there, and as you guys know, we say it week in, week out, we're just never taking that team. Even if it's got to be something really exceptional, like we have literally nobody else to take. And we had slated to take Seattle a couple of weeks ago, as I'm sure a lot of people did, and then we just didn't. And I have I'm upset we got knocked out. And I do have some regrets for our picks, and we'll get into that, but that's not the regret. It's not taking Seattle.
Correct.
It's letting our eyes and our subjectivity get a little bit the better of us, I think, this week.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we're dust. And just thinking back, it was a 27-week run. So the last 27 regular season, NFL regular seasons.
Yeah,
we've been involved in this pool. It's been a hell of a run. I always knew this day would come.
Very likely, yes. I thought it was coming last year. I'm glad it didn't come last year, but yeah.
This is correct. Yeah. So, to make it this far again and again, it's going to come. You don't want it to happen. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I was depressed for a couple of days after. You think about it, as our team was going down, the realization of the run is over. Early in the week, I continued my thought process as if I was going to make a pick. It's hard to get out of the routine.
We still might be. You never know. I'm taking a look at the Survivor Sweat entry you noted to me. I haven't had a chance to take a good look at it yet to figure out what I think it's worth, given the
we'll get
the teams
down.
that are gone.
We'll get to that down the road and the logistics of that and talk. But yeah, 27-week run, hell of a run. Again, we'll get into our reasonings and whatnot, but we're still remote this week. No jackets, and we might not have a new patch this week, next year, to put on our jackets. So, it's going to be to somebody else, of course, most likely. So let's do a little recap of last week. 505 hit the skids, so 30.9% went down this week. There is 1,237 entries remaining out of the 9,267 entries. 86.65% of the pool has been eliminated through week 7, including the 2 no picks. Did I mention maybe it's a good idea to get a proxy service? Or
once, maybe twice.
Maybe twice. Yeah, exactly. So through 7 weeks last year, there was 2% of the pool remaining. So we were in really good shape, or at least we thought we were last year. And approximately 11% off the pace this year. So a little off, but 86% of the pool is gone. I mean, it's right there for the taking. You know, so not sure.
There's still a long way to go.
Yeah, it's a long way to go. We've had some conversations about if Seattle doesn't go down, the odds on this thing now being split by 25, 30 plus people. The percentage.
Yeah, although it's still, we still have a long way to go. And you're definitely right. It's just, it depends. If you get a couple of big upsets on Thanksgiving or Christmas, those days are so determinative. It's rare, as you noted, that you'd have anybody that takes, that you'd have 60% on any one team. So other than one of the special weeks where there's not a lot of
course. Of the 10, there was 10 that entered last week with all 10 entries. 6 of them laid the wood with the Seahawks and got through. So there's 6 still with 10 entries. 1 had the stones to fire on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and got whacked. The 3 others decided to start sprinkling and spreading around. Speaking of which, I would love to have one of those individuals on our pod sometime to discuss their strategy. Maybe they don't want to discuss their strategy. I don't know if there's, certain math behind it, but, when are they going to decide to start spreading it out, or do they just continue to go until Thanksgiving with these 10 picks and then put a stranglehold on the contest on the remaining entries?
Maybe, given it's winner take all, that's always a possibility. However, I do remember when I said I'm not sure it's clear, I do remember looking up as the season started and taking a look at some of the software we used that we were putting information into that would spit out some suggested picks. And it really did, they did note there that, you are taking too much risk on one team when you have that many entries.
Yeah.
You just are. It's nobody has 100% chance to win, and certainly if they do, you're going to have 100% of the people on that team, right? So At some point, maybe if you have 10 entries, you're taking 8 of 10, 9 of 10, but you should probably always peel one. I think at least peel one off as a hedge. It's especially if you're going to put all 10 on someone like Seattle, because you're in the same spot again, right? Now here you had Seattle win, and you still had about 30% of the field get knocked out, which is pretty unusual because that means between Seattle and those other 30%. There was only, roughly 10% of the field on anybody else, right? Sure. So at the end of the day here, if Seattle wins, you're not going to usually have 30% knocked out. Maybe you have 10% knocked out. So you picked up 10% equity. But if Seattle loses, you're out. Mm-hmm. And even that's, 1 in, I don't recall the line in the game, but, 1 in 9 times or something thereabouts, right? Which is a lot.
Yeah. And we've always discussed, those 2 favorites and the percentages of one of them going down. And sure enough, in the morning, Buffalo found themselves in a rock fight up there in New England. Had that feeling all along in the game. I was a little bit more, how would I say, convinced that the Pats would be involved. Arizona, they've fought. They've played a lot of good first halves. They haven't sealed the deal other than one time. And of course, it took us out. But Arizona seems to be in each and every game, but they just can't seem to close. And so I wasn't as confident in Arizona as I was the Pats. And I know I was speaking with somebody a couple of days prior, and they were kind of shaking their head at me. And I just told them, the Buffalo going up there, divisional game. Belichick knows how to defend against that. Allen was going to have some issues pushing the ball down the field. They're going to make him play left-handed and take Diggs away. And sure enough, they were in a dogfight. So, it happens. And that's some of the things that we're banking on to hopefully, clip this pool. But
the reality here is, even with the picks we had, if Buffalo loses and Seattle loses, we're in phenomenal shape if we advance. But even if Buffalo wins and Seattle wins, we still would have picked up a little less than 30% equity because both of our teams wouldn't have gotten knocked out, right? So maybe 25% equity, which on a week is a great week.
Yeah.
Losing 25% of the field, if you don't lose your entries, is fantastic.
Yeah. If Seattle does go down, like Buffalo, and Tampa, follows suit, if we get through with 1 or 2 entries, this thing is sub 350 entries.
Right.
And that's the big if. That's
of course. It's a huge if, but that's also what you're playing for. And again, that's going to happen. I'm just going to pick a number, call it 10% of the time.
Sure.
Right. So 10% of the time you're picking up just massive amounts of equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of the time, and by the way, the probability that both of our teams would lose this week was about 9%.
Yeah.
So, it's also, there's your other side of the 10% equation.
Yeah, we've had conversations, off air about, the losses that we have taken and the math and percentages behind that. It's just been just hasn't been our year. Just hasn't
No, I mean, it's
been our
been
year.
shockingly bad. Like I noted last week, and it's been the same for us this week. I mean, you get teams that are, 80% likely to win, but the one that's 75% likely to win loses. And
Yeah.
we're on the one that's 75% likely rather than 80. And it's that can, of course, can happen, but again and again and again and again is very unusual to happen.
Yeah. So we were monitoring Thursday night's game, at least I was for sure. And once we started getting reports that Lawrence might be out, I started, considering seriously of whether or not to take an entry on the Saints. We didn't because Lawrence was healthy, but I did mention to our group that some might get cute with the Saints regardless. 42 seemed excessive, but they took them and got clipped. But the reason why I was considering is there wasn't a lot of options this week if we were.
Once you're passing on Seattle, right? And Buffalo was already gone for us. Now it's interesting because if Buffalo was still there for us, I know you didn't like the game. It would have been an interesting debate because the system, the math would have spit out, ignore Seattle, take Buffalo. I don't know what we would have done. Maybe we take one on Buffalo, one someplace else. I don't know. Or maybe we passed them all together. I'm really not certain. We didn't have that decision to make, but we were never taking Seattle. You're right. And once you're not taking Seattle, like again, and we knew this, there were no great spots. Most of the spots are effectively 3-point favorites, and a number of them are 3-point favorites or 2.5-point favorites on the road.
Yeah.
Right. So, which probably should circle us back to what we did take and why.
Yeah. So at 4 p.m. when the picks locked, we popped onto the Survivor Sweat X handle and gave you some of our reasoning. And we were absolutely spot on. We thought it was going to be top heavy with 2 teams. I mean, that isn't a big,
Sure.
I'm pretty sure the majority actually thought that, but we believed that there would be 55 plus with Seattle, and I thought it could push to 60, which would have been a record of one team prior to Thanksgiving or those special weeks. And sure enough, it hit 60 on the nose. And it was a record for the Circa Survivor pool prior to Thanksgiving. So we were 100% right there. We knew Buffalo was going to come in a close second. So it was going to command 70+% of the pool.
And then after that, they're all just scraps. I mean, they're all about the same.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, we had that locked in. We ended up, we were debating quite a bit on the between the Rams and Cleveland.
Well, there were 3. Yes. I mean, in reality here, though, there were the Rams. Yeah. I mean, there were technically 4, if I remember right. There were the Rams, the Browns, the Raiders, and I feel like I'm missing one. Am I missing one? Maybe there were 3. Yeah, 3, I guess.
I thought we were pretty locked in on the Raiders, which was absolutely disappointing. We can get in that for a second.
Oh, Baltimore. That was the other team.
Yeah, Baltimore.
I know we want to rule them out, but that is the one I want to address here, actually, most specifically. I'm not going to say I regret our pick. It is what it is. The math on the pick kept spitting out the Ravens and the Browns. Those are the 2 that kept getting spit out. The Browns, we made some very good quantitative things we could actually measure, reasons we didn't take them. Now they won, sort of. I mean, it was far from convincing, but you can address some of the specifics on that. Now the Ravens game is more interesting to me in that you have the psychological factor. I think if we're math guys that never watch football at all, we may end up taking the Ravens. It was just incredibly hard. The Ravens have burned us a couple times, and it's been incredibly hard to look up and think that Detroit's just going to get smoked.
Yeah.
Like they're not even going to be competitive in a game. They're one of the hottest teams in football. And so when I say that's the reason you're noting there were really only 3, we never really considered them, because there's not a single person in our group, even though they spit out as our first or second choice mathematically, myself included, to be abundantly clear, not a single person in our group had any appetite to actually take Baltimore against the Lions. None. No appetite. Yeah. None. No, absolutely. We looked at it and the math said take it. We ruled it out and we moved on. Now, that said, the week prior, we took what the math told us to take and we got smoked. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, Baltimore was favored in the game. I do know a lot of sharps that bet Detroit. It wasn't warm and fuzzy for sure. Afterwards, I did read some DVOA clips. Baltimore played like the 4th cleanest football game in history, something to that record. Literally the best, cleanest game that they've ever played in the history of their franchise. in terms of mistakes, execution. They played a perfect game. Do I wish we were on them? Sure, absolutely. But we were not. It was just a game that we wanted to avoid, at least.
It was. All I'm alluding to is the analysis was different for us on the Ravens game than it was on the Browns game.
Yeah.
And I think everybody should be aware of this because it's hard. Like, we can say this all day long, but the reality is when you sit down and you have to push the button. We never really went into an in-depth analysis on the Ravens game because everyone hated it anyway. Nobody wanted to take it. So we're like, how are we really going to take the Ravens? Detroit looks so good. The Ravens have looked pretty bad, or pretty mediocre, I should say. They had some of their injured players back, but not all of them. And, you know, you have a limited amount of time. So it's not like we were taking Detroit, right? But we just moved on. We just ignored that game, moved on. And I think we had a good analysis of the Browns game. I think we had, I don't know, you know, it's hard to be results oriented in these things. You just don't know if this is the 1 time out of 10 it's going to turn out this way, or the 9 times out of 10 it's going to turn out this way. I think our analysis in the Browns game is very good. I think our analysis in the Raiders game was bad.
Oh, extremely bad. Extremely bad. I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Or their coaching is extremely bad, or both.
Man, the lack of effort on the defensive side of the ball was incredible. The defensive line was just getting pushed around.
They didn't tackle. Nobody seemed to care. The DBs weren't tackling. The linebackers weren't tackling. They weren't wrapping their arms around guys. It was like a hip check. It was like they were playing hockey in the secondary. I don't understand what that was from a defensive standpoint at all. I know they literally made a Division II quarterback in his first NFL start look like, I'd say Joe Montana, actually, because it was like he's also running, or some West Coast offense guy, because he's running a lot of, and you have to know he's going to run a lot of checkdowns. You can't really expect him to just look deep all the time. They ran some play actions. The Raiders couldn't stop the run. You've got a quarterback, you've got to assume they're going to run a lot. It didn't matter. They let him run. They let him run. They let him pass. They let him do whatever he wanted to. I couldn't fathom the defense would be that bad. But let's not forget, for all intents and purposes, despite the final score, I mean, the Raiders really only put up 6 points on 2 field. You could argue they put up 3 field goals. They missed 1, right? So in reality, the last score is complete junk. You know, Chicago doesn't care. They effectively, their offense sort of produced 9 points, despite the fact they missed a field goal early.
Yeah.
And the actual last field goal, I don't even think they're supposed to be going for a field goal.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's sour grapes for us, but you could tell within maybe the first 8 to 12 minutes of that football game that we were going to be dead.
I wouldn't call it sour grapes. We said we made a bad analysis. Sour grapes will be the next game we talk about. I'll have some sour grapes on the end of that game. But my sour grapes on the Raiders game, on the Raiders, is there, but it's nothing to do with Survivor. My sour grapes on the Raiders are fact that we live in Las Vegas. I have season tickets to the Raiders, and I go to a lot of the Raiders games. And the coaching in that game, to me, the preparation, the effort, as you said, is just inexcusably bad. And I don't know what's going on over there with McDaniels. I have no idea. I was a supporter of him being hired. I was a supporter of them giving him some more time. But I think, as you said to me midweek, or maybe mid-Sunday, it felt like a week, for some reason, they just don't seem to want to play for him. And I replied, look, I have no idea, right? I have no idea why. But at some point, if they're not going to play for him, you can't get rid of 53 guys. You got to get rid of the coach. So he could be the greatest coach in the world. If they're just not going to play for him, it's not relevant.
Yeah, I just don't get it. There's just something off there. I wish we would have seen it prior. But, they
haven't scored 20 points in a game. They haven't broken 20 points in a game this year. They came into this game 3-3, which is crazy. They're lucky. I mean, it's crazy that they're 3-3. And of course, we have some sour grapes with them. We had the other side of the game with them. I think week 1, Denver, and Denver lost, right? So the Raiders have burned us a couple times. Baltimore has burned us a couple times. Pittsburgh's burned us a couple times this year. But at the end of the day, that's not the bitterness. That's not the sour grapes there. The sour, I just don't understand how they could be coached that poorly. I could see them losing. Things happen. They're on the road. Maybe they take another injury. Devontae Adams gets nicked up, or their backup quarterback gets hurt. Hoyer, like, who knows? But to not even be competitive, to let the Chicago offense run all over you.
Yeah.
Like their offense, the Raiders offense hasn't been great anyway. So, maybe they lose a game 10-7 or 13-7 or 13-10 or whatever, 13-9, because they don't like to go for touchdowns, lots of field goals. But I can't see how you let the Bears drop that many points anyway. Granted, some of it was by the offense pick. The pick effectively, the pick 6, like there were issues there. Anyway, the Rams game.
Oh gosh.
There's my sour grapes.
Yeah, so we landed on the Rams. We knew that the Rams had an issue at running back that they were trying to solve. But looking at all the analytics, it looked like they had plus matchups on the in the wide receiving core all day long. I thought Stafford would have a field day. I mean, I thought they played okay. As a matter of fact, they were up 17-10. They kicked the attempt the field goal. If they go up 20-10 there, I think it's a whole different ball game.
Well, you're absolutely right. They also 17-10, and one of the scores, and it is what it is, was the pick. Call it a pick six. It wasn't a pick. Was that the one?
No, it was a pick six. Yeah,
that was the pick six. It was, I can't remember, it was a Raiders game or Rams game. It was the pick, and they're tackled at like the 3 or something. They go on a couple of plays later, right? So yeah, so you have the pick six there, which, you know, we're banking on their offense to be productive, despite the fact they have no running back. One of our biggest concerns about the Rams was that Pittsburgh's coming off a bye. They've had more time to prepare. They're more rested. The other hand, the Rams are at home. Pittsburgh's coming from the East Coast, coming west. And you're right. They kick the field goal there and pick up another 3 points. It completely changes the dynamic of the game. And then you've got the last, you know, whatever you want to call it, 3 minutes of the game, which, you know, I hate to ever blame a loss on officiating. I'm sure, have been on the right side of some bad calls. But I mean, some of those, I don't even know what to say. Like I kept looking to really try to see that pass interference call. And I'm sorry, the pass interference call when Pittsburgh's trying to get another first down and run out the clock. And then you've got the incredible strangeness, right? Now I'm watching it from a sports bar, so I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it looked as if, you know, they called what is a complete phantom call. If anything, I thought the receiver grabbed the DB's arm. And then suddenly they call on sportsmanlike conduct the other way to force them to have another play. So someone can say, okay, well, you know, it evens out. It doesn't even out. It's going to be 4th and 7 if there's no call. Right. And that's going to, they're punting. Like they're done. Right. Or we're getting the ball back one way or the other. Instead, they get another shot at 3rd and 7. They get 6.5 yards, 6 yards. And then you get what I call, you know, the Vinny Testaverde touchdown play for the first down, which is what brought in replay, where the guy, you can clearly see the guy misses by half a yard. He just, I looked at it 10 times. I know I'm biased, but man, there's just no way he gets that first down. You get McVay that's totally out of timeouts, but there's 2 minutes and 10 seconds left. So it's not the auto review inside 2 minutes. No. So there's no review, there's no timeout, and that's the end of the game.
No. Yeah, incredibly frustrating, you know, and again, it's high. The game is highlighted for us because it's our last entry, and
of course,
you know, everybody has these stories with different games.
Yeah, but notice I'm not whining about the Raiders game as much as I am saying we made a bad choice, right? Like if the Rams lose by 30, then we made 2 bad choices. Like I'm not. It's just, and again, you're. I mean, the Rams could hold there. They could get the ball back and throw a pick to end the game, like our fantasy quarterbacks do every week.
You just want a shot.
Right. You just want a fair shot at trying to actually win the game there. The Rams played about as poorly as they could play, I guess, to lose this game. It's very strange. Like, I feel like the Rams played better the whole game. I'm looking up. I really felt during the game, okay, well, you know, it's closer than it should be. I don't like letting them hang around. I didn't look at the in-game lines, but I got to think for most of the game, the Rams were very sizable favorites.
Like I said, I was okay with the analysis on the Rams. I thought we made the right play. The Raiders, obviously, we were way off. Circling back to Cleveland, we went back and forth. We talked about the uncertainty of Watson. We weren't gonna know before we had to push the button on his shoulder. Even if he does give it a go, there's some ball security issues. There's the opportunity or the high probability of a re-injury, which I think happened the first or second play of the game. So, you know, we had that pegged, and we were happy that we had pivoted at that point. Now, of course, Cleveland survives, and the NFL is coming out now saying they botched 2 calls at the end of the game for the Colts. So be it, whatever, you know. Again,
and it is a strange thing there. I know it shouldn't matter, and with all due respect to people out there that took the Browns, you know, once the teams that once we're going to lose with Pittsburgh and with the Rams and Raiders. I actually like to see the other ones we were considering. I'm sure everyone feels this way. Like the Browns and the Ravens lose too, right? So this way, well, we were never taking Seattle. So I'm not going to go, oh, we should have taken Seattle. That's never on the board. But here it will always haunt you of, should we have put one in the Ravens? Should we have put one on the Browns, right? Whereas if they lose, you're like, all right, well, there's no team I could have taken that was going to win. So it didn't really make a difference.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. We move on.
Well, they move on. We may move on, but we'll move on with the pod.
They move on. We don't move on. We are dead. Who's not dead is Browna. So last year's co-champ, he had 3 picks heading into the week. He took the Seahawks, the Ravens, and the Saints. So there's one defending champ still alive for the improbable repeat. So for those of you out there, you still got some, still got a chance of a champion. I think there's another champion that's still in the running as well. But yeah, if you want to look up and track those entries, I like to go to survivoratlas.com to figure out and identify who's got what. It allowed me to quickly find out who had the 10 picks and who went where. It's a really user-friendly site. And as I mentioned before, I have no affiliation with it at all. Just a great site to pick up some information for you out there that's following closely. So yeah, it was a survivor sweat this last weekend, and we did not survive, but we did sweat. And we are dead for those of you that's just tuning in. So that is it for the first half of this. And let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to look at week 8.
We shall. See you in a minute.
Time for a message from our sponsor. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with the Survivor Sweat Podcast.
If you live out of state but want to enter any of the biggest football handicapping contests in Las Vegas, you've come to the right place. Football Proxy is the most professional proxy service in Las Vegas and can serve as your trusted proxy to enter your picks each week for the Super Contest, Circa Sports Millions, or Circa Survivor contests. What makes Football Proxy different from other proxies? Well, like other proxies, we have late selection deadlines and an easy-to-use web portal to submit your picks each week. But, unlike other proxies, we allow our customers to change their picks anytime before the pick deadline, which is crucial when gathering last-minute information. Ask another proxy if they allow you to make changes to your picks and see their reaction. It's what makes us the top-rated proxy service in Las Vegas. To get started, fill out the contact form and a representative will contact you to answer any questions and schedule an appointment. Then book your trip to Las Vegas and meet us at the designated casino to get signed up. Once the season starts, sweat the action all season long with your picks. Schedule an appointment today and compete against the world's best for your chance at millions.
Okay, we are back. The look ahead for week 8. Let's try to help these listeners out here and see where everybody's going to go. There are 6+ teams that are -7 spread or better. So there are going to be a lot of different options this week. So I do see a few plays that might gather some concentration. I think maybe up to 30%, 30+% might go on the Chargers. And, I think because of their low future value, they might gain some concentration there. They're home against the Bears. I know they haven't showed out well, but one would think that they would be the better football team coming in at -8.5 here. I believe they're on the Sunday night football game they're hosting.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think they're going to be the top dog this week. And I think they'll have some concentration of 30% or more.
Yeah. Jumping down. Yeah. I'll just jump down some of the projected popularities. And I'll probably give a little more data than I might in the past because we're not in, even though who knows, maybe by then we are in. The Chargers initial estimates are 35%. I agree with you. It probably goes a little bit higher. And I'll give a reason for that in a second. Second one down the list is Baltimore. Looks to be around 18. Third looks to be Detroit at 16. But again, that doesn't take Circa into account. So I suspect that number goes down a little bit as some people might still be saving them for Thanksgiving. Then you've got Miami, you got a bunch of teams at like 4, 5, 6%. Miami, Philly, Buffalo, Dallas. I don't think those go up. I think Miami, Philly, Dallas probably go down, if at all, for the same reasons, right? So most of what they go down to probably go to the Chargers. I suspect the Chargers are 35, maybe 40%. Maybe you get Baltimore up to 20. So what does that all mean if we still had an entry in? I would not be taking the Chargers this week.
Yeah.
But we would be having the small argument internally, I'm sure, of are we trying to avoid two teams or just one? And I would say in this particular week, we would probably avoid just one.
Yeah.
I would actually espouse taking Baltimore this week at Arizona, despite the fact they could have up 20%, 22%
Sure.
on them. They have strong EV this week. They have some decent future value, but not crazy. You're not burning Detroit in case you want to use them for Thanksgiving. Not the end of the world. I don't think Detroit's a bad pick with if it doesn't have 16 and if it has 12, it could be rivaling Baltimore, but I think Baltimore would be the most solid pick this week. If I still had Buffalo, they have a lot of future value. Not a bad pick, but they're also playing on Thursday. They're a little shaken up. I don't mean dinged up. I mean mentally they've lost a couple of games.
Well, they are dinged up. They do have some injuries on the defensive side of the ball. It might be a good contrarian play. I think not a lot of people will be on them this week.
Correct.
Likewise with the Lions and the Dolphins, if you have both of those entries, you might look to take one of them here because you know that the public's probably going to be on Dallas. So the contrarian play for Thanksgiving is either going to be the Lions or Miami. And so you might be able to slip one of them by. You got Miami at home versus the Pats this week. And you have Detroit against the hapless Raiders. So if you have all three choices and you have a plethora of them,
then you can also go the other route and take Dallas if you have all of them.
That is true.
Right? You got Dallas at home versus the Rams. So that's also not a bad play. To be honest, they're all fairly similar. They all have comparable expected value depending on exactly how many people end up taking them. But all of that said, if you told me today, who do I want to take? It's Baltimore for the first time, second time, I guess, but taking a team that's playing Arizona. We did week one. We did 1 week. I think we lost. I think that's Arizona's one win. Yeah. But I think Baltimore they're in a good spot here. I don't know how many end up taking them, but you've got a shot to lose 30+% of the field if it turns out this D2 quarterback is really much better than it seems, and that the Raiders aren't as bad as they seem.
Well, there might be more than you think on the Ravens because a lot of people play with their eyes, and what they just saw out of Baltimore, incredible. As I mentioned with the DVOA earlier, they played a clean football game. They looked like a Super Bowl contender, a real Super Bowl contender. And a couple of weeks prior, they were kind of squeaking by. They had receivers that weren't making plays. They had a tough time running the football. Lamar's been playing at a very high level, but it's been all him. He had a lot of help. Defense showed up. Now all of a sudden, maybe the Ravens do show up here with 20-25%. Don't know.
No, they may. I don't think they're terrible at 20-25%. As long as the Chargers stay above 32-33%. I think you're okay with anything resembling Baltimore, Detroit, Buffalo, etc. And I think they're all fine. I'm not trying to be evasive. I do think Baltimore is a very reasonable pick, and I think Detroit is a reasonable pick as well. And I would just avoid the Chargers. I wouldn't spend a lot of time trying to figure out how far the Chargers come down from 35. Like if they hit 24, maybe they're a reasonable pick. That's probably true, but I think you can assume they won't.
No, I can.
Just move on.
Yeah, move on. They're going to be 30+, and you're going to get the entries that have all 10. The people that are just loading up and laying the wood, they're going to be on them. So
probably
this is a good chance to clip them. Obviously with 10 entries, they got a big chip stack, and so if you want to take a big bite out of that, this is your chance to be a big Bear fan.
Yep.
Another thing is, you don't want to look too far ahead, but if you just look the following week ahead, week 9, it's like last week's play. There's not a lot. There are some tough games next week. Browns, Ravens, Saints are the ones that push up, and the Steelers kind of slide in there. So there's only going to be 3 teams, barring any injuries or any unforeseen things, but there's going to be not a lot of plays next week.
That's right.
And so, if
Cleveland's got to be the chalk, but you're right. I wasn't looking at Baltimore against Seattle since you're going to have the whole world on Cleveland next week, Baltimore is probably a great pick next week too.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of picks, a lot of options this week. It obviously depends on what your entry and what teams you have available, but there are some spots here to maneuver. and ways that you can avoid the chalk and maybe clip a high percentage of the pool for sure.
Yep. I would avoid the Raiders this week. I'd avoid the Raiders every week.
Unreal.
I'm amazed McDaniels got back on the bus.
I did make a comment of that prior, is that if he took his club to Chicago, and they didn't get it done in that spot against a division quarterback, and nothing against him. He might turn out to be the next coming Pat Mahomes or Joe Montana or whatever, Tom Brady. It doesn't matter. It's just a spot for the Raiders, and to come out with that type of effort, he needed to find his own ride home. That's
their offense effectively produced 9 points, and I'm counting the missed field goal as theirs, and I'm not counting the junk touchdown at the end when no one's playing defense, right? So their offense produced 9 points.
Yeah, and the Chicago Bears are not the monsters of the Midway. I mean, let's get real here. Incredible stuff. Even the Broncos,
actually, if I want to count
those beat them.
If I want to count, it's what I hear. If I want to count the pick six, and I don't think anybody looks at it this way because it's not that common anyway, but you could argue the offense, the offense net points is, you could, if you want to give them credit for all the points they actually had, you can say it's 12 minus 6 or 12 minus 7. I mean, they threw a pick 6, which is really 7 points, right? So if you want to give the offense credit for what they score, but take away what they literally give up, I mean, their offense it's almost negative. I mean, it's like 5 points in a game. It's ridiculous.
Oh, so you've mentioned a few times, like, we could be back in. So over on Survivor Sweat Marketplace, if you check often, I think you should. Last week an entry went up for 6K, got snapped up in less than 20 minutes. Earlier this week, one went up for 8K. The current implied value, by the way, is 7,491. So one went up with for 8K. It had survived with the Seahawks, and it'll give you all the teams that this entry has taken up to this point. And that thing got snatched up in 20 minutes. And then late yesterday afternoon, one popped up, a lot larger number. This one is on there for 13,000. It is on. Somebody is offering it, and it's got some decent teams left, believe it or not. So obviously that's why they doubled the value, because you had some teams that you could take this week and get through, because the implied value is obviously going to go up if that entry survives. And so, if you want to get back in the contest, or you want to add to your entry list, there's one available there for 13,000. And the bonus is you keep 1% ownership of that as well.
When you sell, right?
Yeah.
You're really buying 99% for the 13,000.
Buying 99%, but you do get 100% of the decision-making.
Oh yeah, of course.
In that pick.
Well, I guess if you had 99% of it, it wouldn't really matter anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to explain why that individual still has 1%.
Yeah. I mean, Circa, if I buy this entry tomorrow, from you, Mike, you're like, I don't care. I just want the 13,000. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I buy the entry from you for 13,000. You paid 1,000 for it, presumably. So you've made 12,000. They charge a fairly nominal fee, I think 5% or something. So, maybe call it $1,000 or whatever. So you make 10, 11,000. You made more than 10 times your money. But at the end of the day, even though I'm going to have the login, you're not going to have the login password anymore. I'll get to, do whatever I want there. But at the end of the day, when I win, Circa doesn't really know who I am in that case, right? They know who you are because you're the guy that actually set up you're the guy that bought it. So there has to be some incentive for you to actually show up and claim. Now, from Circa's perspective, it's also, I'm not sure the way the rule's exactly structured about selling an entry, but you're allowed to have partners for an entry, right? So in this case, it's just your partner is 99%. But at the end of the day, I'm going to need you to show up. So that 1% is kind of your incentive. So if we win, if I win $9 million, you're still showing up to get, 90 grand?
Yeah, 90 grand.
Right? And since you sold it for 13, presumably 90 grand is substantial to you.
Sure.
Then you'll actually show up. Now, maybe you're splitting it 10 ways. And so you're showing up for 9 grand, but still, if you sold it for 13 grand, presumably 9 grand is important to you. So they want to make sure there's some incentive for you to actually show up when the time comes.
Yeah.
And Circa will allocate the taxes appropriately. You're going to show them the agreement. You're going to let them know you own 99%. The other guy owns 1%, and That's how it should be paid out.
Yeah, and somebody asked on the Twitter feed, on the X handle is, would I still have to pay taxes on the 90 grand that I won now that it's not my entry?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Because if I win the other 9 million, I'm not paying taxes on your 90 grand. Now, would I in that case? Sure, who cares? But the reality is they're going to issue the tax forms properly. So you'll pay tax on what you actually win. Yeah. Now, the 13,000 you sell this entry for, you're supposed to pay tax on, but I don't believe that there'd be any real mechanism for Survivor Sweat to issue a tax form for that, because you didn't, from them, you haven't actually won at gambling. They have no idea what you paid for this team. I mean, they understand you paid presumably you paid $1,000, but all they're doing is facilitating a sale of it for you. So, you're supposed to report that to the IRS, but maybe you had 13 entries, you didn't make any money. Yeah. That's between you and the IRS. But the 90,000, you're going to almost certainly get a tax form from Circa.
And there's been also comments is like, how would somebody want to sell an entry when they still have a chance at life-changing money here? They obviously entered the contest and now it's down. It's already clipped, 80+%, 86% of the pool. And so here's your shot. And, why would you
I could answer that now, but it'd be an easier answer. And the answers are fairly obvious in all scales. Like you said yourself, the implied value is $7,000 or $8,000, right? Sure. So maybe this one's a little higher because the teams it has left. Maybe it's a little lower if you wanted to use those teams that are burned on certain weeks. But for all I know, this person has 1 entry, or for all I know, they had 13. This pays for all of them, and they've got 12 left someplace else. Probably not. Maybe 5 left someplace else. My guess is it's their only entry. But at the end of the day, what is life-changing to someone is different for everybody. So it's easier to think about. Let's say you're down to 10 entries, and remember, this is winner take all. So it's 10 entries. Your entry's worth about $900,000. If you could sell it for $900,000 or $600,000 or $1.2 million, I think, I don't want to say all, but I think most probably sell it, because although 9 million may be more life-changing than $1 million, you can get 0.
Yeah.
Right. No, so I mean, it's 0 is bad. It'll be interesting if Survivor Sweat decides to look at this a little differently later. Not look at it differently, but change the platform slightly, where maybe someone, instead of selling 99%, I could see somebody selling off 50%.
Yeah.
Like your entry's worth 900,000, you're going to sell off 45%. So the other person's going to make the final decisions, but you still have the ability to still make something of a pretty big score. Yeah. And for the buyer, it shouldn't matter that much, because somebody buying these things should be looking at what they believe the equity actually is. Yeah. So they're just playing in a slightly smaller Survivor contest.
No, absolutely. That's a really great point.
So that'll be a suggestion I have for Survivor Sweat, to give people the option to sell something other than 99%. The other thing I would put out there for them, and they'll kick me when I say this, because why don't I just go email them privately rather than say something on the pod. I think they need a counter offer button. So this thing is out there for 13,000. If I only wanted to pay 12, maybe the other person would take 12, but he has no idea I'd be willing to pay 12. I have no real mechanism of putting that out there as counteroffer. So that'd be a suggestion they should put up as some sort of counteroffer.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Great idea. I mean, obviously, if the individual is posting it for 13, maybe their bottom number is 10, maybe it's 11, maybe it's 12.
Maybe it's 13, who knows? But at least create, and I think you would then get people more inclined to put some up at bigger numbers. Yeah. And then entertain counteroffers.
Yeah. And there's also been some comments about the integrity, is like, at what point is this, in terms of, let's say somebody that has a huge bankroll comes up and, it gets towards the end and snatches up a bunch of entries that may be posted, whether they're 20, 30, 40, $50,000 an entry. And what's the integrity of the pool? Is there any, or are we just gambling here and trying to give ourselves the best opportunity to win? I
don't really know that there's an integrity issue personally. I mean, you could have had somebody that bought 10 entries week 1, or partnered with 10 people and had 100 entries, and they just made it deep rather than buying them deep, buying them late. I think, like any market, you're creating some liquidity for people. I think one thing, and I'm speculating on this, but it would be my guess, if right now the implied value on this thing is, let's just say it's 8,000, right? I think you probably get 10 for one of these, because people get knocked out early. They want to get back in, there becomes, they'll find a justification. Maybe they like the remaining teams better, et cetera, right? I think when you make it late, And if this was worth 900,000, say the implied value was $1 million.
Mhm.
There are about 9 people left, give or take, right? I have a feeling there it won't sell for 1.2 million. It'll sell for 800,000. Because the person that needs to make the $1 million that's selling it they understand it's worth $1 million, but they'll be thrilled to get 800,000 and move on. They don't want to run the risk of rolling dice to make zero.
True.
I think as the numbers, I'm just speculating, but I think as you get closer and closer and the numbers move up, you'll end up with a cross. Now, I think people are more likely to pay over implied value because they want to be in the contest, but later they're more likely to pay under implied value because they're the ones providing liquidity. How much under, I don't know. But this goes to your point. You could have the wealthy individual that, right now, maybe he doesn't buy the entry for 13,000 because he doesn't want to pay, 50% more than it's worth or something. But later on, I don't know, like if you have the liquidity available and an entry is worth $1 million and you've got 10 million you could theoretically put towards this, which is not me, be clear. But, you might say, that's great. I'll buy 10 of these for 700,000 each.
Yeah.
Like I'm earning in equity, $3 million. We may not win, but long run, we're going to win. And the variance is obviously much lower if you've only got 2 or 3 weeks than if you've got, zillions of weeks.
I mean, at this point, at 8,000, I mean, it's almost like you're playing a rebuy poker tournament at this point. And there are people that like the rebuy option. There's others that do not like the rebuy option. And so, at the end of the day, who knows?
There's also a funny thing, and this applies to, we've discussed this before, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much on this, but when you own something, it's worth more to you than it is to the person that doesn't own it. It's always the case, right? And so you'll end up with something here where somebody may not want to spend 13,000. They may not even want to spend 11, and yet you may never even sell it for 12.
Yeah.
It's hard to reach that equilibrium. When you get much, much later, again, I think it's easier because the dollars simply become more meaningful.
Absolutely.
To the seller.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Who knows? Maybe we push the rebuy button.
Could happen.
I don't know. After last week, I mean, it's like busting out of the main event.
It is. Part of me wants to, take some time to digest it before we just jump back in. Part of me says, if there was more liquidity in the marketplace at the moment, more of these entries that were available, it would be easier to justify sitting back because, okay, well, maybe we pay more next week, but it's worth more next week if something advances. But this could be the last team that's out there for a while. I mean, there's only been 2 sales. This is the 3rd that's available. So you just don't know if this is your absolute last chance to buy one of these. And that's something that I'm struggling with. But I still think they need a counter offer button.
I just don't know if I could take the pain again of losing.
That's part of the problem. You do it and then you're knocked out this week and it's like, oh God. And I do like some of the teams they have available. I like the fact they've still got San Francisco available, Dallas, Kansas City. Those are great options for multiple weeks going forward. I don't love that they've got 2 of my 3 Thanksgiving games already gone, but they still have 1 available. So not bad. Commanders and Seahawks are gone. Who cares? The Bills and Lions. It's Bills, and Falcons. Who cares? It's Bills, Lions, Dolphins being gone. But it's not as if we had entries that had, we had the Lions and Dolphins available on most.
It has the Broncos still available?
Hold on, let me check. Well, yes, they're still in the pool. So yes, they do. And of course, we didn't take them, so the Broncos won this week. That's sort of the key. I think Denver, I think Sean Payton should be calling us and paying us to not take them in Survivor. Then they're like a lock.
It's absolutely incredible. I remember on our thread, I said, we should have just taken the Broncos all
along. I saw it. Oh, I definitely saw that.
All
right.
I think that's enough for the recap of 7 and the week 8. I've had enough. I don't know. We might rebuy, we might not. Somebody better go and snatch it up so we don't.
Either way, we'll be back.
Yeah, either way, we'll be back to help you out along the way. If you have a question or you want to chat with us about the contest, hey, we're out for now. I'd love to help somebody. Go on the discussion board at survivorsweat.com. Go on the Survivor Sweat X handle. Hit us up. Be more than happy to chat, discuss, discuss strategy, anything that surrounds the contest. Again, it's the greatest contest in the world. I'm sad to be out for now. And I wish everybody luck going forward. And I will tell you, the win at the end is beyond sweet. And
someone's gonna win. But it's that that pleasure that makes the pain so painful. If it was easy, it wouldn't be that painful, but it wouldn't be that great to win either.
This is true. This is true. All right. For myself and Russ over there, we are out of here. We'll be back next week. So good luck in week 8 and survive. We are not. We are dead. But get those picks in, and we'll see you next week.
Later. Bye.
Looking for Survivor strategy articles? Did you lose your last entry on a Survivor contest and wish you could rebuy? Check out our marketplace and you may find what you need. Head over to survivorsweat.com for all things Survivor. And we'll see you next week for the next Survivor Sweat podcast.